Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back with our first race in the FIA Manufacturers Championship, driving in the McLaren Group 3 car. So we've obviously done the Group 4 races already. This was the third race of the day. The first race, actually, we did a very nice qualifying that put ourselves right up the front in the top. I think we were P3 or 4. However, we got a penalty right at the start. The race just went a bit downhill. We managed to fight our way back and getting a reasonable finish by the end of that race. Actually drove quite well, looked after the tyres well. However, had to do this race because second race of the day, I don't think we quite hooked our qualifying up. So started the last race of the day in P3, quite a nice qualifying position. Unfortunately, in this lobby, a massive disconnect issue again. Only 14 drivers. However, luckily now with the new point system, this does not affect the overall points. So that is the good thing about the new point system. Although the actual points are not high enough for top split in my personal opinion, it's still going to encourage people to drop their rankings down to split 2 and 3. The good thing is the disconnect issue doesn't affect the points that are attainable for the top drivers. So that's a good thing, because we don't want a situation where, you know, in official season you could be completely wiped out the season by disconnects. However, now starting the race, going into turn 1, you can see everyone taking it fairly sensible, what we like to see. It's normally the case when you've got people that know what they're doing at the front of the grid. You can see no one really doing anything too rash, everyone just keeping it nice and sensible on lap 1. My main aim really here now is to just try and stay with that lead battle for as long as possible. Now, one concern I had with the McLaren Group 3 car was, after driving in a slipstream for a number of laps, the rear tyres started to just drift around every corner. When you're in clean air, I was actually able to do quite good race pace with this car. I think we did a practice race when we were racing with Calster. He was behind us the whole race, and because I was in the clean air, we were able to finish the race. I think it was like 35 seconds, something like that. I think it was like 28:35 or something like that. I can't remember the actual finishing, but it was like in the seconds it was a 35. However, in our first race of the day, we were quite a bit off that because we obviously had a penalty and we had our race ruined a little bit. But this race, so far, obviously starting the race, main aim to stay with T-GT as long as possible in the Audi R8. Now, the Audi R8 is obviously one of the strongest cars with the NSX around this track. McLaren in qualifying wasn't too bad. It was by no means the strongest car, but this is one of my stronger tracks really in terms of qualifying. I do tend to qualify quite well around this track because it does suit me. However, the McLaren, not really up there with cars that are in front of me. FIA doing a reasonable job in the Jag. I think he could have done a little bit better in qualifying. I think he didn't hook his lap up 100%. However, FIA's tyre management, we all know, is one of the best on the game at the moment, up there with the likes of TRL Lightning. So the first lap started pretty clean. You can see no issues at all. Driving to the end of the lap, still in P3, managing to stay with the group in front at the moment. Obviously, I think B-Racer obviously doing a lot of tyre management. I'd be interested to see what strategy. I was not sure what strategy T-GT was going, because I think in the second race of the day he actually tried a one-stopper, but it kind of I think he was going to go on a two-stopper, but he might have got a penalty. For myself, I'm not 100%. It was like in between really. If you could do good tyre management, you might be able to do a one-stopper. However, I think it might have been better to do a two-stopper in the McLaren. I'm not 100% sure really. It would have been interesting to try it. However, we tried the one-stopper in the first 2 races, and this race pretty much was going to go for the one-stopper. The only chance you'd have of a two-stopper if there was a big gap behind you, around 4 or 5 seconds behind, where you could go into a nice bit of clean air. And that is really hard to judge. This is one thing I wish that we knew on Gran Turismo. It would give you more deltas to the cars that are behind you. So for P on the left there, where we have the name 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it'd be nice to actually have deltas to each one of them cars to yourself, because you know once you've worked out the pit lane loss, you know it'd be nice to be able to see, well, there's a 5-second gap there, I can pit and still come out ahead of that car. Drivers in real life get this information from engineers, so I think it'd be nice just to at least give us the splits to the cars that are around us in terms of, you know, P5, 6, 7 and 8, you know, so we know where we could possibly pit and come into. I don't see why we haven't got that information. I mean, I would rather have that information than the country that the driver is driving from. I don't think we need you know, that information, even if it was just a, you know, even if it wasn't to the exact amount. If it was just 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, I think that information would be more beneficial than the country, etc., that the driver's from. But you never know, they might add it in the future, or probably won't, as we come to the end of lap 2. And again, we're managing to hold on to T-GT in the Audi R8, driving pretty well. You can see I've got the brake balance all the way to the front with the McLaren. Obviously with the McLaren being an MR car, it is going to wear the rears out, and it is quite aggressive on the rears around this track. I don't know if it's going to be like this on every track, but I did find that the car just wanted to rotate through corners. So you'd be going into a corner and the rear would just randomly start sliding and drifting. And obviously the way you drive MR cars is you drive it with a lot of lift and coast. So what you do is you go into the corners, you coast through them and let the car rotate by itself, because that's how MR cars get a lot of speed through the corners. However, with this car, when you do that, it just wants to rotate too much and starts drifting. Could be something with the setup on the cambers or the toe angles maybe that are a little bit aggressive on the rear. Possibly that's something that might be causing it. It'd be interesting to. One thing I would be interested to trying out is to try and fix some of the setups on these cars. I think it's something I could do on a video if I could try and work out setups on this game. I did used to do a lot of setups on old games like Assetto Corsa. I wonder if there'd be something we could do without altering the BOP that could improve certain cars in Group 3, just to make them a little bit more drivable and make the whole field a little bit more close together in terms of BOP. As you see, FIA and TGT going for that two-stop strategy, what I thought was a two-stop strategy for FIA. However, what we do know about FIA is that he can do insane tyre management. So he's pitted at the end of lap 5 there. And if he's doing a one-stop strategy at this point, he's going to have to do 10 laps on the tyres, which is impossible to do that in an MR car. I'm not 100% sure if I could do it in a FR car. If I did do it, I would be incredibly slow at the end of the stint. I can tell you that 100%. But FIA, with his time management, might be able to succeed. As we see B Racer there, build himself up quite a nice gap there. You can see driving very well in that NSX. The NSX was very well suited to this track. However, I do know from driving the NSX that car also does suffer with the rear tyres as well. It's not the best car in terms of tyre wear. I did experience it at Suzuka, where I think it was when we were in the short races with the extreme tyre wear, where we were on the last lap and I was literally fighting to keep that car in a straight line. It was drifting on basically a straight piece of track with a slight kink in it. It started drifting on flat out zone, so that car also pretty difficult to drive once the tyre wear comes in. But at this moment we're in P2 now. Obviously Tigany 100% going on the two-stop, pitting on lap 5. There's no way he's going to be able to get that MR car to the end, so it could be interesting towards the end of the race how it develops, and it'll be interesting to see if I've made the correct choice in staying out and going for this one-stop strategy. Now, I hadn't tested the two-stop strategy properly. It's something that I probably should have done in an MR car like the McLaren. It's not like the Porsche, and I think the Alfa Romeo and stuff like that can actually do reasonably long stints. They've got quite good traction on the rear of the car, so this is it's obviously a bit of a test, especially on the last stint. What I did find though with the McLaren was, when it's heavy, it tends to drive a little bit more stable to the ground, so it doesn't kick the rear out so much. What you're going to see at this stint actually isn't too bad. We're lap 7, lap 6, still in the 58s, not dropped off a massive amount. It has dropped off like over a second, but it's still drivable, it's manageable, it's not drifting through the corners too badly because we've got the weight in the car. Maybe the positioning of the fuel tank on the McLaren is in a slightly different position to other cars, but it seemed to drive more stable with the fuel on than when the car actually got light. What I found was when the car gets light with this, it starts to want to drift when you come off the throttle, and as soon as you coast through a corner, it just starts rotating. It's like the car cannot cope with the lightness, the loss of tyre wear, and coasting at the same time. So that's something that would be interesting to find out as well. Maybe it is just something with the car, I'm not 100% sure, but I do know with cars like the Porsche, even when the car's light on fuel and warm with tyres, it doesn't tend to drift. It's got very good traction on the rear. The rear tyres really bite into the ground compared to this car, so you don't really tend to spin them up and drift through the corners. But going through this lap 7, this is going to be our in lap. You can see we have B Racer behind us and Tigany behind that. Now this is one thing that I was thinking as well with the strategy at this time. I didn't know if to pit on this lap because there would have been a possibility to stay out and maybe hold the cars up a little bit behind me, because looking at the gaps, they probably wouldn't have got me into turn 1, and they might not have ended up getting me until the end of the lap, and then I could have pitted and went for the shorter stint on lap 8, so I would have only had to set 7 laps to do on the next set of tyres, which might have actually helped out, because Tigany obviously being on the two-stop strategy would then obviously get ahead of me, but I'd then be able to jump him because I'd have fresher tyres. But you see, we decided to pit this lap, It'll be interesting to see how this pans out as we go into the pit lane. Nice and clean. He didn't hit the wall, luckily. If you do hit the wall there, I think you lose a bit of time in the pit lane entry, possibly, as we put a new set of tyres on now. Obviously it's quite nice to get a new set of tyres though in this McLaren. It does, like I say, drive a little bit strange when you get light fuel though. I think you're going to see it pretty early on in this stint where the car wants to rotate. As we come out the pit nicely in clean air, and luckily into clean air. And FIA just up ahead of us, he pitted on lap 5, so he's had a few laps to get a bit better pace, and he's managed to jump us there. But he's going to have to do a lot of tyre management to the end of this race, and this will be interesting if I can manage to, one, try and catch him up. As we see, it's going to take me a bit of time to warm the tyres up though with the McLaren. Obviously that is one issue of only having the hards available in this race, so it's going to take a bit of time to get the heat in there, start getting your lap times back. And one thing I didn't really want to do was what I learned from the other races was, with the hard tyre and the lower fuel, I didn't want to destroy these tyres, because this stint has to be the longest stint. Obviously we're going to have to do 8 laps. We did 7 laps on our first stint. This one is going to have to be the longer one now. This is where the option of extending to 8 laps on the first stint might have been beneficial, but we would have came out probably behind more drivers. And one thing I don't like is the dirty air. One thing I'm really looking forward to is the inclusion of, possibly in the next update, is going to be the new dirty air system, which isn't going to be as severe. So hopefully that comes sooner rather than later, so we can actually risk going a bit longer on a stint to come out behind cars, so that we can actually attack them a bit better. Whether it'll work out like that is another thing though, but it'll be interesting to see if it's not as extreme, if we're able to follow cars a little bit easier, because GT3 cars, as we see, we jump onto lap 10 there, pushing on a little bit. We've not really gained much, but lap times haven't been too great. You see the first lap of 57.2, not really the best lap we've ever done. We should have been in the 56s at this stage. But yeah, like I was saying, in Group 3 cars, you should be able to follow it a lot easier. You do get a little bit of loss of aero, but it wouldn't be as much as they show in this game. Whether they'll still keep the loss of aero high in Group 1 cars, I'm hoping they don't, because Group 1, maybe you should have a bit more than this. I think Group 2, for example, in terms of Super GTs, I watch them in real life and they're able to follow extremely closely to each other. So I think Gran Turismo emphasises it a little bit too much. As we see TGT coming out the pits for his second stop, nudges into CSX Will there, a little bit aggressive, but kind of fair. He was side by side, but just probably braked a little bit late coming out the pits. But now we're going to try and have to defend from the Audi with brand new tyres. You can see we've only done a few laps. The pace isn't bad. We've just done a 57.0, so the fastest lap of the race, a 56.3. We're only 6 attempts off the ultimate pace at the moment. So I thought we're going to try and defend this, because if we can hold off that Audi for a few laps, that car's going to start getting very iffy to drive, I'd say, in terms of the rear tyres, because we know that the Audi is quite aggressive on the rear tyres. Although he's going to be on much fresher tyres, I thought we might as well try. I've not got a pit again. Ticheney's not got a pit again. This is a straight race to the end. So my feelings was, we'll try and defend. However, if it seems like there's an opportunity where he's just going to get past them, we're not going to over defend, and we're just going to try and hold our position for as long as possible. And also, we need to be very careful of the NSX that's right behind Ticheney, because if he goes for a move, we've got to make sure it's done in a place like turn 1 where I can then just tuck in behind him. I didn't want to get in a position where you're out, off the racing line, and you end up getting overtaken by the NSX. So going down this straight now, you can see Ticheney a little bit too far, but he's about 2 turns behind. Is he going to go for a move into this corner? You can see he's still 2 turns behind. He's getting a little close. I decides to go in the middle of the track just to defend. He goes for a bit of a lunge up the inside, has to brake very late. He actually brakes too late and misdoes the corner. Actually knocks me off slightly there on the corner. Now, it was a racing incident. I don't think it was definitely not deliberate by Ticheney. I think he just braked a little bit too late, and he went all 4 wheels off the track. And to avoid himself getting a penalty, I think that he turned back on quite in rather a straight angle. It wasn't really took in a way that you would rejoin the track, but he'd done that to obviously avoid getting a penalty. And unfortunately, that meant that he hit my car as I was just taking the normal racing line. So it was a bit aggressive in my view. It was a racing incident, but we'll have a little look now and I'll show you my opinion there. As we nearly got our front of our car chopped off there as I was on the inside. Just cut back across the track, but I think that was totally fair. That was just, he had the racing line there, I was coming from behind, so it was up to me to brake at that point. However, with regards to the other incident on the chicane, I think that I was kind of in the right. I know a lot of people will disagree, but at the end of the day, I didn't need to pit again. We defended there. I seen him going up the inside. We go to the right hand side of the track. He lunges it up the inside there. And this is the point where I think it all goes a little bit wrong, because at this point you can see he's all four wheels off the track there, completely all four wheels. It's not just by a little amount, it's quite a big chunk of the car off. And at this point, instead of rejoining the track at more of a gentle angle, he's had to rejoin at an angle to avoid getting a penalty. And this is what's caused the problem, because you can see he's very straight on. I'm just taking the normal racing line. He's going to hit that curb and probably, you know, not much he could do really in the situation once he had hit that curb. I don't think it was deliberate. I just think it was one of them racing instances. You can see there where he's hit the curb and he couldn't turn. I pretty much know that he would have been trying to avoid the incident. However, it knocked me off and it lost me a position to P4, well P5 at the time. So unfortunately, we dropped down 2 positions. Now, the reason I wanted to defend that corner is because I think it would have been better for him to go for it into turn 1. I think he would have got me in turn 1 no matter what. All he had to do was stay behind me. I think he got a little bit ambitious into that corner. I think he clearly outbraked himself, didn't really judge the corner very well, and unfortunately I think we actually both lost out in that, because now obviously he's going to be behind the driver that's also on the same strategy as me, and obviously with the fact that he doesn't need to pit, he's not going to just let him pass. You can see he's going to hold his line and try and defend as much as possible. But at this stage now, on this next lap, our tyres are starting to feel a lot older. Tisney's tyres are fully up to temperature now. Obviously, he's just come out of the pits. First lap, he didn't have the temperature, but now you can see he's all over the rear of that NSX. The NSX is going to defend it though. He's not just going to give up the position, which, like I say, is fair because we're on the same strategy from this point. None of us need to pit. You can see he's holding that inside line. However, Tidgeny wrong foots him there, and he's able to get a much better exit from the corner, giving himself the inside now, and he's actually ahead of the Honda NSX. So at this point now, the NSX is probably just going to back out. He's on the left hand side, but he's just going to tuck in because Tidgeny's already got that moved on, and now he's passed. However, now we've only got 3 laps to go and he's got to catch up to FIA. So maybe that instant there could have, if we would have drove it differently, I would have held on to P4. I think in my opinion, I think we would have been best doing the move into this corner up here. I think Tidgeny would have had much better brakes once he had warmed his tyres up, and could have easily got the move done into turn 1, either on the inside or outside. No matter where I defended, I think he would have been able to get past the McLaren with the tyres in the condition that they're in at the moment. However, now we're going to be sliding all over the track. You can see in first gear there, a little bit aggressive driving now. It's kind of a bit frustrated, so probably destroying my rear tyres in this McLaren. And one thing it doesn't like to be driven is like aggressively. It likes to be driven very smoothly. This McLaren, as soon as you drive it very aggressively, it starts killing the rear tyres. And one thing I've noticed about this McLaren is it needs to go into first gear quite often because of the gearing. You'll see that first gear actually goes up to 70 miles per hour, and if you shift early into second, it bogs down a little bit. So that's one reason why with this track, with a lot of slow corners, it was affecting the rear tyre wear quite a bit. So hopefully it attracts with more of a flowing track, less slow corners. Like for example this corner up here, you'll see I have to go into first gear briefly just to try and get some acceleration, you see, because if in second gear it just bogs down a little bit, doesn't have the maximum pull out of the corner. So that's one area where I'm sure other tracks might be a bit better for McLaren, but it wasn't the worst car for in terms of overall speed round it. It was just the tyre wear on the rear was a bit of a problem as we now go into this fast flowing corners. And you can see at this point, I think it would have been an advantage for me to pit at the same time Tidgeny, because we were only about 1.8 seconds or something like that, maybe even 2 seconds behind when he pitted. So probably would have been better if I pitted at the same time on that 5 and went for the 2-stop strategy as well, because I think it would have paid off a lot more, and we might have even been able to challenge for a podium. But at this point now, we're at the 100% defensive, tyres that are completely worn out and not really able to challenge for that top 4 position now, with losing that position to CSX Will in P4 there. But now we're going to have to defend against IA Racing, a driver who in the past we've had various issues with in terms of some aggressive moves. However, in this race, let's see if he's going to keep it clean right to the end. We're going to be suffering with tyre wear. We've got 2 laps to go. Can we hold on to a top 5? A top 5 still isn't the worst position from a top split race, and it'll be good enough to give me reasonable points in the FIA Manufacturer series as we go through. Again, through this section, you're going to see how it wants to rotate the car. You can see it's almost drifting through the corners, and this is one issue that I have with this. Comparing to the Porsche, for example, or other MR cars, they drive a lot more stable than this McLaren. it's such a strange feeling, and like I say, I think it's because of the amount of slow second gear corners where the car just wants to rotate on you. And again, through here you see second gear and it's rotating. You have to hold it, and it's nearly losing it there on the exit, but just about managing to hold on. You can see in the bottom left hand corner we're starting to develop a bit of a train behind us with people probably in cars that are just looking after the tyres a little bit better. We've got that Porsche, which should be a lot stronger at the end of this race, and Porsche obviously a very strong car at this track. And as we go through this corner, we start losing the rear, and it goes again drifting. Now this was partly caused, when I watched this back, I think this was partly caused by myself. I don't think I was concentrating 100%, and I didn't get the car all the way to the right hand side of the track early enough, so I ended up going right into the corner and then left, and that's caused the weight distribution of the car to kick the rear out. If you watch it back, you'll see I had to like widen the track too late. I don't know whether I just wasn't concentrating, was not really thinking what I was doing, but lost myself a bit of time there where we nearly lost it. Just about luckily managed to hold on to that drift and keep ourselves in P5. So got away with that one, and now we're going to have to defend from a very fast Porsche on probably much better tyres. As you see, he's going to try and go around the outside. I'm just going to hold it on the apex here now until I feel confident to get on the power. You see the Alpha almost losing control there, as we've now got 3 cars lining up to take this position from me in the McLaren. We're going to have to defend this to the very end. IA Racing is going to try and go around the outside. Will he be able to hang that Porsche all the way around the outside? Driving it very clean so far, I have to say. It's about IA Racing. Maybe he's changed his approach to racing, because he didn't try anything rash there. He tried to go around the outside, very sensible, tucked back in, and again into this corner, he doesn't try anything too rash. You can see again, holds his position there. So it's nice to see him racing like this, because IA Racing's not a slow driver. He just lacked a bit of racecraft in the past, but now he seems like he's definitely picked up a little bit in this race, driving a lot cleaner and no rash moves. Again, you can see he's having a look there, doesn't dive up the inside, decides to just tuck back up the inside. There was a bit too much of a gap between myself and him for him to dive into that corner, but again, now we're going to have to be very cautious into the braking zone, into this slow hairpin. Will he be able to go for a move? But again, we got a reasonable exit, managed to hold that gap to over 210. So again, he's not really going to be able to go into an overtake move there, and I actually hold the apex very well. You can see just about avoided the car drifting through there as well, because I had to go into first gear. And when you do this with this car, it does tend to want to kick that rear out. Now go through this fast corner again, you can see this time no issue with the rear, and that really does highlight the issue that it was my fault before, because of the way we took the entry into the corner. It was pretty much 100% I didn't realise at the time in the stream, I thought it was just the tyres, but it was actually my fault. I just over rotated the car trying to go from the right to the left and get some speed through the corner, and I did it too late. Obviously probably wasn't 100% concentrating, because the race had gone a little bit downhill at this stage. But we're coming up to the final chicane. He's going to have a look up the inside there, but again, he's too far back. We've just got to make sure we take the chicane nice and sensibly, on the power nice and early, and actually did that chicane quite nice there. And now into the final corner for the final time. Just got to hold the apex and make sure that we get a strong exit from the corner, on the throttle nice and early. Did that very nicely again for the final lap and over the line. You can see the difference there at 59.3, the previous lap over 2 minutes. So we actually did a pretty solid last lap of the race and come away with a P5. It could have been better. Issues in the race, but like I say, most of them were just racing incidents. I don't think it was anything spiteful from anyone. I think it was just hard racing with a little bit too aggressive on the brakes from Tizian, that's all. And then the rejoin wasn't possibly the safest rejoin in my opinion. But we come away with 279 points. Like I say, not a massive amount of points. P5 in the last slot of the day. It's not the worst situation, but at the end of the day, P5, still a top 5. And hopefully we can pick up some more points in the Group 4 races. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that video. Make sure you hit that like button if you did like it. And also hit that subscription button on screen at the moment. Bye everyone.